turn. Okay, so we're doing Genesis 42. Um, the last time we met, we did Genesis 40 and 41, and both of those chapters are kind of similar, going over the dream chapters. And now we're coming out of it. And honestly, this is it's going to take a few chapters to kind of go through all the beats, but this story and Joseph's story is kind of the last story of the whole of all of Genesis. Um,
Did you guys not do anything last week?
no, we did
Okay.
not do anything last week because I don't remember
Like end of
why.
week stuff was
No, it was because I was coming back from Seattle.
Okay.
So that's why we didn't do anything last week. So yeah. So this story of Joseph interacting with his brothers is really the culmination of all of Genesis. And so there's a couple of ways in which that's the case. One is it's the fulfillment of Joseph's story because it's the fulfillment of the dreams that he had whenever he was younger, right? All the prophesied dreams that he had whenever he was younger, those get fulfilled. It's also the fulfillment of um at least partially the call of Abraham because it's going to be the way in which uh he's the blessing of he's going to be like the answer to the blessing of the nations. We're actually going to see that in this chapter. It's not super highlighted, but it's there. But then also one of the things that I think is really interesting is it's the final instance of the kind of reoccurring disguised identity motif that we've seen throughout the text, kind of beginning with Abraham, right? And it's the final version of that story where at this point, almost everything about it from what it originally was is reversed. The person who is disguised is now the ruler of the area, right? Tradition, like, right? We set up this dynamic between kind of the line of, for lack of a better term, I'm just going to refer to like the line of like the Nephilim, and I don't mean that by like as in like the actual giants. I mean that by as like the line of like the men of renown, the people that are big and in charge, and you got to kind of be wary of them, right? And so this is like Egypt and the other nations that are around them and all that stuff. And usually that's the person that's being tricked, right? Abimelech, Pharaoh, all of this stuff. Whereas now, that's the person that's in charge is the one that's doing the tricking. Also, the people being tricked are the people of God. This has happened a couple times, right? Like whenever Jacob got tricked. Jacob got tricked like a couple of times. Isaac got tricked, right, by a disguised identity, right? So the trick has already been like played back on the line, and so that has already happened. But one of the big things that's really different is that now the purpose of the trick being performed is no longer for protection or gain, right? Every single time this has been done previously, it's been for like protection and protection and gain are still going to come out of this, right? That's still going to happen. Like the Israelites are going to be protected from the famine. They're going to be protected from the other nations because they're going to have like a little land in Egypt and they're going to have gain. They're going to get a lot of stuff from it. But that's not the purpose of it occurring. The purpose of it occurring this time is actually figuring out the truth of the situation, right? Really, from Joseph's point of view, Joseph is trying to figure out what is the truth of where his brothers are at. We're not going to get to see all of that because that kind of dynamic plays out over like the next like 3 or 4 chapters, like up until like 44 or 45-ish. Yeah, it takes a while. Also, one of the things that's different about it is that it's pretty clear that this time, it never like explicitly says it, but it's pretty clear that this time the trick is intended by God. Like God like wanted this kind of scenario to happen. Whereas previously it was always really murky and like straight up sometimes called a sin, right? Like Abimelech's like, why are you doing this terrible thing to me? Like this is a great sin and like all this stuff. And so it was always like, is this actually a good thing? Should this be happening? Right. This time it's pretty clear that it's like, okay, this is what God wanted to happen. And it plays out because Joseph explicitly says like what you intended for evil and like all of this stuff, God intended for it to happen, and everything's getting revealed now. So I'm kind of excited about some of the stuff because actually I because of the way that we're looking at it. I think when we get to some of the later chapters, we're going to be able to look at these things with a lot, I think, with a lot clearer vision, and it's going to make it very clear how all of this really points to Jesus, almost in a way like that I never really even thought of before. Like next chapter, there's a pretty clear case of like penal substitutionary atonement, and I was like, oh, I never noticed that before, but it's like really explicitly there. But that's for later. So we'll go ahead and start it now. Let me make sure.
Chapter 41.
And okay, here we go.
Chapter 42. When Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" And he said, "Behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die."
Okay, so I mean that is just a great line of why do you look at one another? Just the absolute shade. Yeah, just you guys are doing nothing.
Yeah,
Hey, whoa, Simeon, quit drooling.
Ruben, calm down. Calm down.
It's not real, Ruben.
One of the
I know
other
he's named Ruben, but he's not a sandwich.
So one of the other things that like we should notice like as we're going through it is like the build up to like the ultimate climax, right? Because like a lot of this stuff, again, like a lot of stuff in Joseph's story is very repetitive, but there's this great build up to the final reconciliation between Joseph and his brothers. Like it's played out over a large number of chapters. There's multiple trips back and forth between Egypt and Canaan. And also there's a lot going on with Joseph's internal turmoil. He speaks to them roughly, but then also he remembers the dreams, and then he accuses them of being fake, in a similar way as they had at one point accused him of being fake, right? They called him the Lord of Dreams and all that stuff, where they were making fun of his dreams. Like, so you have this like real back and forth of what's going on in the story and also what's going on with Joseph internally.
So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. "Where do you come from?" he said. They said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them. And he said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." They said to him, "No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies."
Okay, so there's a couple of things in all of that. So one, there's a I think the internal, like, it doesn't give it like much discussion. It really just the story just really presents itself. But there's a real back and forth with the internal struggle going on in Joseph. So like if we think about it from Joseph's perspective, like the last time he saw these guys, they like they treated him terribly and put him into slavery. And he doesn't know, like, he doesn't know what state they're in. Like, he doesn't know if they're repentant or anything like that. And so he has this like internal desire to like, and we'll kind of see that where it's kind of explicit that he has this internal desire to like help them out, but also he's really pissed at them and doesn't know what to do about it. But then at the same time, he also knew that this day would come, right? Because this day was like predicted. It's what his dreams were about. Were like this exact thing, right? Of them coming and bowing down.
Deja vu.
Well,
Exactly.
what I just realized more so about the dreams, I don't know why I haven't put that together before, was that in the first dream where it's his brothers, they're all bundles of grain.
Yeah.
And specifically, his grain is more than their grain.
This is more than their
And
grain. Yeah.
they're bowing down to him, asking for food because he actually has it and they don't.
Right. And
Stories are so far apart. You just fail to make.
Yeah, I forget that connection. But
you forget it.
Like,
Right.
a lot happens. You got Judah and Tamar. You got Potiphar. You got servants and other dreams.
Right.
well, and every time it's been interpreted to me before, it's really just like, oh, it's them and they're bowing down. But like the fact that they are in the dream grain and it's the situation for that is further like it's this instance. Like
And the thing that's significant to me about it that I started thinking about the time, like the story and like the thematic elements of it that are actually the thing that ring in my head and being the most similar, is actually Jesus in the garden, right? It's a very similar like situation internally for like Jesus in the garden and for Joseph at this point in time, because both of them are like, they're things that they themselves predicted would happen, right? That they knew like this was going to take place,
And they get there.
and they get there exactly. And it's the difference between having foreknowledge of a thing happening and actually going through the experience of the thing, right? Of the thing actually occurring, and that even if you have this like this vision of you can see this thing happening, that when you get there, suddenly you have conflict and you don't fully know what it is that you should do. And how you have, I think it's actually a good representation of, because both Jesus and Joseph, right? Like really great examples of people that are following God, right? But even they, and even in their lives, whenever they have all of this like predictive prophecy that's going over them, they still find themselves in times in their life where they're like, oh crap, what do I do here? Like I don't know. And I think that's a really just sobering aspect to keep in mind, and that's that's clearly there in both of their stories. The other thing is where he accused the accusation of you are spies, you have come to see the nakedness of the land. So the nakedness of the land, like if you click on nakedness in like Step Bible, one of the last definitions is like defenselessness, right? So it's probably not a comment about you've come to see like how little food we have right? The first couple times that I read it, I was like, oh, they've come to see how little food they have. That seems really weird because the whole reason why they're there is because there was a famine and there's famine all around the world. So everywhere has nakedness, right? And it's like, oh no, that nakedness probably has more to do with the fences of the land and just everything is kind of weak. And so, and as spies have a military function. He's accusing them of planning an invasion, which is also a little bit ironic because the response is, your servants have never been spies, but also the people that are reading this and as they come back up out of the land are famously going to be spies as they go back into
The land
like
that these people weren't,
that they're
And to
that
be,
we're from, but we're inspired.
exactly
and to be fair, they do kind of invade after like
they
many years, and then they're
Sort of.
outnumbering the
I mean they have a very
Just
slow 400-year
It's
invasion.
a crisis at the
Yeah.
border, is what it is.
It's basically what it is, and they kind of do like make way or like make
Bunch of
like
illegal
leave with all of their stuff.
Bunch of undocumented Hebrew.
Undocumented sojourners, yeah. But yeah, so
knowledge jobs.
you have all of that
Administrative
stuff that is going on there. Yeah, okay, let's keep going.
He said to them, "No, it is the nakedness of the land that you have come to see." And they said, "We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more." But Joseph said to them, "It is as I said to you, you are spies. By this you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you, and let him bring your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you. Or else, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." And he put them all together in custody for 3 days.
Okay. So there's a couple things here. One, we have this instance of the brothers talking too much kind of gets them in trouble. I couldn't remember. I thought we had some example of something like that happening earlier in Genesis, but the one example that always reminds me is of the one where it says like, "Do not swear," and the guy like swears like the next thing that crosses my threshing or like
Jephthah story?
yeah, Jephthah story like crosses like the threshold or whatever, I'll kill, and it ends up being his daughter and like all this stuff. And it's just another example of like don't talk too much. But
These guys just self-incriminate.
yeah, they just self-incriminate.
Should have been like, what was I doing, officer?
But also you have here, so we've talked a little bit about how they're like about like the documentary hypothesis and how people are like, oh, there are like different accounts that got like stitched together over time, and people have these. So this is an example that some people use as like, oh, this is evidence for there were multiple accounts that got stitched together over time. Is the fact that the first thing that Joseph says is, you guys are going to stay here, and just one of you is going to go get your brother and bring him back to me, and that will prove that you weren't lying. Which, first of all, I'm not 100% like, I get what Joseph's doing, right? And also we had this question, which is still not 100% clear to me as to whether or not did Joseph previously know Benjamin. We were pretty sure that he probably didn't. That Benjamin, I forget what the rationale was. I have to actually go back and watch
I remember
my own
hearing-
video. Yeah, like there's some rationale for why Joseph doesn't actually know who Benjamin is. But it doesn't actually make sense to me as like, if Joseph wasn't Joseph, why would this prove to you that a set of 10 guys are not lying, that one of them leaves and comes back with like some other dude. And then it's like, oh yeah, they weren't lying. They
Are you
actually
saying that
are
he
11.
also, like,
His brothers weren't the brightest. That's kind of what it comes down
Yeah,
to.
I feel like not only that, I
Don't
feel
you know
like
that there can't be spies in more than groups of 10?
Yeah, they're only in groups of 10. As soon as they're 11, trustworthy.
Yep.
I feel like at this point though, surely the brothers would be like, okay, well, this guy has no reason to think we're spies, so let's just try not to even like question him anymore, and let's just do it.
Yeah, we're just rolling with it, right? And it really is the lot their standpoint of the logic of we're just rolling with this,
Yeah.
which is probably something that like a lot of people were really used to, of just whenever somebody that's more powerful than you says do this thing and it'll prove it, they're like, okay,
There was no
sure,
9% jury.
right, exactly. They're just like,
People
okay, I
back
guess
then
we're
were
going with
right
this.
now.
I mean, Solomon is apparently the smartest dude for wanting to chop a baby in half. So like the bar's not super high.
And that's hundreds of
The
years
old,
later.
Yeah,
pro-choice
exactly.
argument in
Hundreds
the
and
Bible.
hundreds and hundreds of years later.
Right.
The only thing I can think of is that if he's been told that it's a younger brother, even younger than the rest of them, depending on how young he is, how convincing would spies be if they brought in like some kid? And then how convincing would that kid be? Like, do they have kid spies?
Kids.
Maybe. I don't know. Do they have really
That's
effective kid
Yeah,
spies?
didn't it recently like a
Spy
talk show go
kids.
say how like roughly what his age was, Joseph? Right around?
Yes, it did say because the
So
story
what is he
starts off. The story starts off with Joseph at around 17.
And then it's
And then all of this happens whenever he's like, all of this I think is like roughly like 20 years later.
yeah, I remember it
um,
said so many years went by.
Yeah, because I think he's
Oh,
like
okay.
30 something. Whenever it says whenever he like how old he is whenever he like takes control. But what else was there I can just say? But anyways, I'm not totally convinced by like the soundness of his test, but whatever. Joseph has this test. He presents it to them, and it makes sense. To me, it makes a little bit of sense of why he's doing this. Maybe because he's trying to suss out information. He's trying to think about what's going on, but also he kind of undercuts him because it says, and then he put them all together in custody for 3 days. So it's like he gave him this plan about one of them going out and then coming back with their brother, but he immediately put them all in jail. So he couldn't send one of them out. But what happens is that he's going to end up changing his mind. And the fact that he changes his mind, and there's kind of these two different accounts of what plan Joseph has, is one of the reasons why people that believe in the documentary hypothesis are like, oh, these were two different stories, and then they stitched them together. And I still have problems with that, as we've talked about before with other things, because it's like, okay, if that's what's happening, is that like different accounts are being like stitched together, wouldn't you just like get rid of one of the accounts and like pick one, right? And just be like, oh no, this is what's happening. There's still a literary theme, which we just talked about, of Joseph dealing with this internal struggle, which that's going to play out over the next like 3 chapters. So it doesn't make sense to me that you can just explain like, oh, the reason why Joseph is doing these conflicting things is because of these conflicting stories. But also the fact that Joseph is now uncharacteristically conflicting in what he wants to do is very different than everything that's happened beforehand. Every single time that Joseph has like something that he was wanting to do before, he was just like, yeah, I had these dreams. This is what they are. You need to listen to them. I have this interpretation for your dreams. You need to do this. You need to do this. Blah, 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 blah. Like everywhere else, Joseph is very like matter of fact and like really straightforward. Now, all of a sudden, for a couple of chapters, he's really waffly. And it's like, what makes more sense of that sudden waffleness? That there were these multiple accounts that got stitched together because you guys think that happened everywhere. Like that's what the documentary hypothesis is, that these stitched account things happen everywhere. But actually, it's only happening in these like few chapters with this one character. And so to me, it's like it's grasping at straws. to read it in that way. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is the thing that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, which we're not going to see like the full like conclusion of this, but the hints at resurrection as a theme in this story. It doesn't really there's no explicit resurrection in the Joseph story, but there are multiple mini hints at resurrection, and there are multiple kind of small resurrections that occur. So, but they're all like perspective based. So for one thing, Joseph resurrects to his brothers, right? He was dead and now he's back alive. Simeon is going to end up resurrecting to his dad, because his dad at one point is going to say, "My son Simeon is dead," and then Simeon is not going to be dead. Jacob himself, right? He had all of these phrases where he was like, "I will go down with my son to Sheol. I am in Sheol," and all this stuff. And there will literally be a time where it's like, and he revived, right? And it's like he comes back. You also kind of, again, this one's a little bit weaker, but like if Benjamin like wasn't, you could even have that like the brothers revived to Joseph, or even that Benjamin, who like if Joseph did know him, he was gone and now Benjamin's going to come back. So you have all of that, and then even right here, you have them being put in the pit, being put in prison, and then after 3 days, they come back up out of that. All right, so it's like again, right, that mirrors Christ and like his resurrection, coming back up out of death after 3 days. But this is written like way beforehand, so it's just like a slight echo, and that literary theme is like there. But you're going to see that like throughout these.
And then one thing you mentioned over these couple verses is that you said that it was like Joseph changed his mind on whether or not to execute his like, test or not. Though,
well, he changes the test. We're about to get to that,
right? But and that's kind of the thing, is in the change of the test. The way it reads to me, it sounds like, because initially the test is send one of you and let him go out. Then he reverses that, and we're about to get to that.
Yes.
That we send the rest and keep one back.
Yes.
And also given the concerns from Jacob at the top, that he was concerned that if we send little Benjamin with him as well, that he might be put in some kind of danger. It sounds to me like perhaps the brothers didn't want to do the test of sending one person back because of the dangers of traveling.
Yes. Well, that's actually what I was going to say, is that because we're not given an explicit reason for why Joseph changed his mind, but most likely the reason why Joseph changed his mind is probably exactly what you just said, which is that sending one guy back all the way is way more dangerous than sending 9 of them back and bringing an extra one. And so that's probably why Joseph made that change. It's probably just a practical change. But also, I think that it does have to do with a further seeking of God's will. And we'll see that because, right, it's first line. So I'll just play it.
On the 3rd day, Joseph said to them, "Do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest,"
right? Do this and you will live, right? He gives them an opportunity for resurrection. Do this and you will live. And I'm giving you this opportunity because I fear God, right? And so, and in the same way that Jesus says, like, not my will, but your will be done, right? So he's in this inner conflict state, but he's still relying on God. Joseph has that same thing of like, I'm not 100% sure what to do, but I'm going to rely on God. So this is the new plan, right? Like he changes his plan, but that's okay.
"Men, Let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody, and let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your households. And bring your youngest brother to me. So your words will be verified, and you shall not die. And they did so. Then they said to one another, in truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us and we did not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. Then he turned away from them and wept. And he returned to them and spoke to them. And he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. And Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, and to replace every man's money in his sack, and to give them provisions for the journey. This was done for them.
Okay, so larger section here, and so we have the first or Joseph now has the first indication from his brothers that they actually are remorseful, right? And as soon as that happens, that kind of like breaks him, right? It's at that point where he hears that they actually are remorseful about what they did to him. Reuben has this point about we distressed his soul, and so now that distress is coming back onto us, right? They have this understanding of like this karmic understanding, right? Of you do bad stuff's going to come back to you, right? They have that. They recognize their sin, and but even though that happens, and Joseph knows that they are at least somewhat repentant of what they did, he still maintains that like level of harshness. He probably, so there's no reason given for why he detains Simeon. He probably detains Simeon because other than Reuben, Simeon is the oldest. And also, as Reuben is the one that is right now advocating for him, and back whenever everything went down, Reuben also advocated for him. He probably wants Reuben to go back with them to ensure the success of that. Like they bring Benjamin down and eventually are going to bring down the whole family, right? He wants all of that to go through. But he wants to make sure that they come back down. Oh, you also have the line of this was done for them, right? So that's explicitly an editor's note about Joseph's internal thinking on the situation, right? Where Joseph's intentions were good, right? This was done for them. Like he wasn't doing that to set them up. He was doing that to take care of them so that they had stuff. He just wanted them to come back. But even that, so right, we're going to eventually have this line about like what you intended for evil, God intended for good. But we also have an example here of something that Joseph intends for good ends up getting interpreted by them as something that is evil. But even in their interpretation of it as a thing that is evil, it ends up acting as a good, right? And so because it ends up humbling them and making them realize, oh, like this is very serious. Something significant is going on here. We need to make sure that like we go back and we do everything right. And so I think it's a really interesting example of miscommunication and things going wrong. But even as they are going wrong, if God's the one that's orchestrating things and making things happen, even that thing that you wanted it to be good that gets interpreted as being bad is going to eventually be something that's good. as well, right? Like even those things. All right, let's keep going.
Then they loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed. And as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw his money in the mouth of his sack. He said to his brothers, "My money has been put back. Here it is in the mouth of my sack." At this their hearts failed them, and they turned trembling to one another, saying, "What is this that God has done to us?" When they came to Jacob their father in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them, saying, "The man, the Lord of the land, spoke roughly to us and took us to be spies of the land. But we said to him, 'We are honest men. We have never been spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is this day with our father in the land of Canaan.' Then the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, 'By this I shall know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me and take grain for the famine of your households and go your way. Bring your youngest brother to me. Then I shall know that you are not spies, but honest men, and I will deliver your brother to you, and you shall trade in the land.' As they emptied their sacks, behold,
So like I don't have much to say about that portion, right? Because that's all like repeat of everything that happened. But one of the things that I was thinking about, because right, I even mentioned that I was like, okay, it's a weird thing about them like talking too much and kind of getting themselves in trouble. But everything that they said was true. Which that's one of the constant like back and forth story elements and things that people debate about all the time is like, okay, when should you be lying like, or when should you be lying? Like is there ever a time that it's like okay to lie, right? And Christianity takes a pretty hard stance on this, that of like, no, never lie. Like, don't ever do it. But there's actually plenty of places in the Old Testament where it seems like lying was actually the right thing to do. So the most obvious example is Rahab with the spies in Jericho. Rahab explicitly lies about the spies being hidden on her roof. And then Hebrews later on says like that was a righteous thing that she did. And so you have this like weird relationship with it. But here in this story is one of the examples of where it's painted as them telling the truth was a stupid thing to do, right? Like, and even like Jacob kind of gets mad at them, right? He gets mad at them. He's like, why did you tell them that you had a younger brother? Like, none of this would have happened if you hadn't said that. But the fact that they were so stupidly honest is another factor in their ultimate redemption, right? Because if that hadn't happened, they wouldn't have gotten brought back. They wouldn't have been brought down to Egypt. And so there's a lot of those elements there of like especially in this part of I guess I want to say like the risky nature of being like naively honest, but that it's also like, again, like, because everything in this story, right, is pointing to God is still going to make it work out. And so if you're trusting in God, it's almost like if you're trusting in God, you can get away a lot of times with being naively honest. Now, you might still get screwed over a lot of times, but like it's ultimately going to work out. And there's a lot of that of it's ultimately going to work out in this story.
And it's a funny juxtaposition or like ironic twist for Jacob to be talking to him.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
obviously, if Jacob was in that situation, he 100% would lied like the whole way through.
Exactly.
Because he did on multiple
he's also
occasions.
like used to it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's one of the things that's actually really interesting to me. And so I went ahead and read like the just all of the remaining chapters. And I don't really have like something specifically to say about this, but it's always fascinating to me of this switching back and forth between whenever it says Jacob and Israel, and like when it does that and when it makes that transition. Um, some of them are like really interesting in like 2 chapters or something like that. But yes, it's like 100% like right. Like Jacob the Deceiver would totally do this, and that's partially why, right? Because like ultimately, the if there's a single person that's a victim in this story, right, it's Jacob, right? But he's getting he's getting his comeuppance, and that this like reversal trick thing is happening to him. But it's for his good, and almost in the way of like, if we think about that second story, right? So like the first, so we could say that the first vision, right, had happened, right, of them going seeking grain. They are grain. They bow down, right, and then the follow-up vision is stars, the sun and moon bowing down to like his star, and that's actually a reversal of like station and status and like how high up you are, and that's gonna like that's also going to take place, and it's going to take place after once Jacob comes back in. And so like you have all of those different elements taking place.
I keep thinking about how, let's say that if they hadn't been so naively honest to Joseph,
Right.
we still don't even know if Joseph would have been able to call them out on it because we don't know if Joseph.
We don't know. Yeah.
So I'm thinking like, okay, what if they had just said, "Oh, we promise we're just 11 innocent."
Well, but what they probably so like we
Which
can
then again, though, still would have been a lie. Which would have been a lie for them to say 11 brothers, but technically could have been a truth to Joseph.
yes.
Of course, had they said 10 and not mentioned anything about a dead brother, Joseph would have been fuming.
And so
Probably
we
killed him, yeah.
we
Because
can
they are spies.
if we have it in our heads that if we have it in our heads that Joseph's plan is to bring his whole family down, if they had, we can go through this thought experiment a little bit, possibly. If that hadn't happened and they just said that, probably what would have happened is that Joseph would have said, well, bring your father down, right? And so then what would have happened is, in Jacob's desire to protect his son, whenever Jacob comes down to Egypt to verify that they're all being honest, he probably leaves Benjamin and he leaves a portion back, which then brings up like the issue of he might be in danger, right? Someone might attack him because he's all alone and all this other stuff. And that like, so to me, the logical conclusion of if they hadn't been honest, it would have led to further division of their family, actually. And actually, the thing that keeps their family ultimately together, they think it's destroying their family, is that they were honest. But actually, the fact that they were honest gets all of them to the same place.
A few steps.
Exactly. And actually gives them more protection throughout the whole ordeal. Okay.
Every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob their father said to them, "You have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. And now you would take Benjamin? All this has come against me." Then Reuben said to his father, "Kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you." But he said, "My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm should happen to him on the journey that you are to make, you would bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol.
Okay. And so that last little bit,
Is that like the ballsiest promise in the entire Bible?
you're like
I feel
kind
like
of
it is.
like it's pretty close. I mean, in
Like that is wild.
well, it's also it's interesting to me because like he's basically Reuben's risking his two sons for Jacob's two sons, right? Because Joseph's already like out of the picture in both of their heads, but like Benjamin and Simeon are on the line, so it's like a two sons for two sons trade.
So it's like if you lose two sons, I'm losing.
Yeah, exactly. It is a really bold like promise to make. Also, it's not the only one that ends up getting or is it Macon that
Being
gets made, I guess. Judah is going to give like a similar promise next chapter. Actually, most of next chapter is just Judah talking like the whole time. Or that might be in a few chapters. I might have had that wrong in my head. But yeah, so I just wanted to highlight again, I've already mentioned this, but like, right, he says Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more. He doesn't even think that Simeon's alive, right? He's just like, oh, Simeon's dead, right? Like what you guys just did, like I just traded one of my sons for a bunch of grain and gold. And also, you guys have got us screwed up in this weird plan where you're going to get my other son killed. It's just like, you guys are a bunch of idiots. But all of that is, right? It's all of that is like his comeuppance, but it's the seriousness of the themes that are going on there of what Jacob is feeling. And so that just it raises the stakes of the story. But yeah. So that was about all. Oh, the only other point that I had was the similarity of how the full bags of money, the full bags of money ends up being the sign to Jacob that Simeon is dead, right? Because if we read that again, it's like, as they emptied their sacks, behold, every man's bundle had his money in his sack. And when their father saw that the bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob says, you have bereaved me of my children. And how that's similar to whenever he saw the coat of many colors with the blood on it, that was the signal to him that Joseph was dead. And so there's a connection there between like bags of money and like bloody clothes, and those being the signal that the person is dead. And it ends up being like, and that's why this is kind of like these are like proto resurrection stories, right? Because you never see, like, the person never sees the actual person dead. It's just a perspective thing of, they're gone from my life for a really long time, or all the conditions are met that make me think that they're dead, but then they end up coming back despite my expectations. Whereas with Jesus, it's he was dead.
Right.
But you still, but also, if you think about it, the bloody clothes, the bags of money, those are also elements in Christ's story too, that serve as additional elements that are offered up to kind of give validity to the story of, like, oh, he's dead.
And so what is it about, what does Jacob think, like, oh, this governor gave us money and so therefore my son.
So I'd imagine that what Jacob thinks is
cultural thing?
he probably doesn't think that he probably doesn't think that the governor or that Joseph put it back in. He probably thinks that his sons did a trick on the guy and stole their money back. And so
Gonna
therefore,
rocket.
Yes,
The-
yes, actually, exactly that.
I don't know if I know what that
From Guardians of the Galaxy, when
okay.
when they make a deal, and the payment's supposed to be like some batteries or whatever,
Oh,
and,
yeah,
and,
he
and then
keeps
and then
the
they're and then they're
batteries.
leaving, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I still got these batteries out of the deal too." And then they obviously get tracked down and almost killed. Or that's a setup for that movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the exact type of thing I was going to relate it to. Is well, either Jacob thinks his sons have done that, or whenever the sons see it, apart from Jacob seeing it, they react the same way because they're probably thinking that either they've been set up to be framed like
Well,
they
you
just
also
stole it.
also have the issue of because there's so many of them there, and so many of them have done. They've been a part of so much deception. They could just think that one of the other brothers
Right.
did this, whereas just like
we can't
okay,
forget
it's
two of
like-
the
it's
brothers
like-
decided to slaughter a whole village.
yeah, it's like okay, which one of you just screwed? It's like
Can't
what,
forget about that.
or it's like which one of you screwed over Simeon and
All
got
right,
him
who
killed?
was it
And it's
this
like
time?
I'm just gonna pretend like it wasn't me.
It wasn't me, but I did kill a few other people.
I did kill a bunch of villages.
But yeah, obviously
I didn't
that's
steal any money. I stole some slaves. But, I didn't steal any
but
money.
obviously that's going to be the
Whole
first
bunch
thing
of
they
money
think of
and
instead of
shit.
like, oh, kindness was done to them.
Oh, phew. Oh, no, he only stole people.
Because especially they're not going to think it was some kind of kindness because they were just like verbally assaulted and then imprisoned for 3 days. So they're not going to be like, oh, that guy was nice and just gave us our money back.
yeah, I'm not thinking that.
And
Call him
this could
Scottish
be
3 times in a
a
row.
way of Joseph testing them to see if they'll trade another brother for money.
Yes, and actually, that's so. I think that that's
He gave too
actually,
much change.
in my
He wants to
opinion,
test
that's
it.
actually because here's the thing: this is actually going to happen again, right? Where he puts like all of their money back in. I guess I'm spoiling it for like
Wow.
in like a couple
Wow,
chapters.
I can't believe you're
But-
spoiling the Bible.
That's what I think
Next
is
thing you're gonna tell me
happening
that all the
there.
Israelites
is
read
that
Egyptian-
It's that later on because he does the
What,
same thing where he
Jesus
gives them
gets
all the
out
money
of
back,
the tomb?
but he very specifically
Absolutely not.
puts a goblet, like a special silver goblet, in Benjamin's bag, and then it's the Holy Grail. Yeah, like way early for the Holy Grail. But he very specifically is like, oh,
He's actually
the only person that I'm going to kill is the one that has the cup. And they're like, no, don't do that. Like, we'll all be guilty. And it seems very much to be a test of like, are they still willing to sell out? And it works on Benjamin because Joseph and Benjamin have the same mother. And so it works where he can be like, I'm going to test my brothers. I know that they're sorry about what happened with me, but that doesn't mean that they're not willing to do it again. And I think that's definitely what's going on in that case. I don't think that's what's going on the first time around. The first time around, I think he's just like, I'm trying to be nice, but like backhandedly. So, any other questions? You got any questions, Mike?
No, I'm all good on my end.
All right, I'm gonna stop the recording.